Hey everyone, so today we're going to do the Starbucks Bling Tumbler. This is kind of a dupe for the Christmas edition. I think they make it in China. I'm not really quite sure. But yes, so I'm using a Venti double wall Starbucks tumbler, the acrylic one. You can use the grande and you can even use the plastic one. I think it was like the $4 plastic cup or the hot cup. It's up to you. But right here I'm using the double wall, and I just wiped it down the second time. Make sure you wash your cup, of course. I wiped the outside with a wet tissue. Don't use too harsh alcohol because it's gonna damage your plastic. So just use a regular wet wipes and a tissue paper. So just wipe everything down before you paint it. Now right here I am using an acrylic paint, but you have two options. When you use acrylic paint, you have to also be careful because acrylic paints will peel off any surface, plastic or anything like that. So you could sand your cup, but with me, I don't like sanding my cup, but I'd always use a clear coat to seal the paint. So you would always have to use a clear coat or any sealing form to seal down your acrylic paint. You can even use epoxy if you want to, but I would just use a clear coat. And if I didn't want to use acrylic, which most of the time I don't, I would use a spray paint. You can go ahead and use a spray paint. Make sure that you make an even coat when you do a spray paint. And even if you do use a spray paint, make sure you use a final coating, a clear final coating. Whether it's matte or gloss, that's up to you, but I usually use gloss. But you can see here, it's the same thing with the paint, spray paint, that the first coat won't always be as, as I think thick. That would cover the black part of the Starbucks, the lines. Because you're gonna be able to see that through the rhinestones. Sometimes you would have gaps, sometimes you won't, but I don't like to risk it just for personal experience. I've always seen the black line because of the gaps. So what I always do is I think I put about 2 to 3 coats of acrylic paint and spray paint, and that way you won't be able to see the lines on your Starbucks cup. So you just go ahead and do that. Make sure you'll let it dry in between coats so that way you don't have any, imperfection or clumps or anything like that. Just let it dry. The more quicker, faster paint you have, the better. And then after that, I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up and show you what's the next step. Okay, so now that I let it dry, this is about 3 coats, and I used a glossy clear spray paint. So it's a clear coat to seal the acrylic so it does not peel off. So I did all of that. Make sure there's no paint inside because that's a no-no. So that's what it looks like. Don't worry about the texture from the inside because you're going to put rhinestones there on top and it's still going to reflect on the inside of your cup. Do not worry about that one. As long as your coat is thick, it should be good. You shouldn't be able to see the black lines and you're good to go. Alright, so now it's time to put the rhinestone. So over here I used the rhinestone from happyglamlife.com. I will put the link down in the description below. I used the color First Kiss, and that's the glue, and that's the tray, and that's the pen. Those are the things that you need to apply your rhinestone on your cup. Now you have to be careful because you need a permanent glue, and there's a lot of glue out there that works and there's a lot of glue there that doesn't work. And for me, I use the glue from happyglamlife.com, and you can also get them from my post. They're called Gem Tack. Again, I will put everything down in the description below. All the things that I'm using, you can go ahead and find there, and also the link. So I have 3 sizes because this is not a straight cup. It is kind of like a cylinder shape where it's like thin on the bottom and thick on the top. So I'm using SS20, SS16, and SS12. For those of you who don't know the SS size, that's 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter, and then 3 millimeter. So those are the sizes of these 3 stones so that I would not have a lot of gaps. So I would always use with the bigger one, which is the SS20. So I put it right at the very top. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom you guys in to show you a little bit closer of where I place my SS20, which is the biggest one that I'll be using. Okay, so like I said, I'm using a permanent glue, and this is a precision glue. Precision bottle, which means the glue would come out very, very precise and small. So just put a very thin line, but enough for your rhinestone to stick. So just put it right at the very top. I know some people use cardstock to put something on top so that way they know their rhinestones are even. I used to start like that, but now I don't because I'm used to it. By all means, it's not that perfect. You know, you could try to make it as perfect as possible, but since it's handmade, it's very, very difficult to make it like really, really straight and perfect, you know. But don't worry, it's not gonna make your cup look ugly, or it's not gonna make, you know, like, it's not gonna make it difficult for your cup. It's just some people prefer to do that they put it on a surface, or they put a cardstock on it to make sure that everything is even. For me, I just use my finger, push it down a little bit, making sure that it's not poking out of the cup, and that works for me. You know, you do what works for you. So again, just put the entire SS20 on the very top around the upper part. And I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit so that way we can go to the next step. Oh, I also forget to mention, in case you notice, that I'm going back and forth. The reason is because instead of just going around, I start from the very front and working my way out. How am I going to explain this? Like left and right. And so I would end up on the back side of the cup. That way, when you start in the front, you go around and you end in the front again, right? But for me, I would do left and right, left and right, left and right stones until I get to the very back of the cup, which will be the last rhinestone that I would put. And I'm going to go ahead and explain to you in a little bit why I do this. All right, so now that we're at the back of the cup, the opposite side of the logo, the reason why I do this is because you would come across where you're on the final stone and your SS20 won't fit. So that way, if it can't fit, you won't have that, very visible. At least I don't like it to be in the front or the side. I like it to be on the back. What I would do is I would use a smaller stone. Like you see that very tiny part right there? Like you cannot fit, sometimes you cannot fit an SS20 because there's going to be just a gap on two sides. So what you would need to do is you would need to put a smaller stone, which is the SS16. Then of course you're still going to have a gap. So what you do is you use your smaller stone, which is the SS12. So just to fill in those gaps. And that's what you would constantly use if there are smaller parts, or if you feel like there is a big gap, you use your small stones. So now the method that I'm going to do is the honeycomb method. This is a very, very, very beginner friendly method. I know a lot of people use the scatter method, which is an entire different video. So this is a honeycomb method, which means you just fill in the second row where the in between of the stones of the first row, if that makes sense. But I don't really know if you can really see it clearly because of the red color, but you just fill in between the first row of stones, but on the bottom. It's so hard to explain, but I'm gonna go ahead and put some kind of pictures. But you know how a honeycomb look like? I guess that's what it's gonna look like. It's basically you're putting it in between two stones from the top to the bottom. So that's what you do. It's a honeycomb method. And you just keep doing that until you fill in the entire cup. And what I do is I do the upper part about halfway through from the logo, and then I would do the bottom part. Because what happened is if you keep going and going and going and going, you're going to end up going to the bottom part and it's very uneven. So I don't like that. So I would only do, now this works for me. I'm not saying that this is going to work for you. My method doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes it works for people, sometimes it doesn't. But you do what works for you. Alright, so I think this is a little bit better. So this is what I'm talking about with the honeycomb method. You see how I'm putting it in between those two gaps from the previous one, and you see that there's a little bit gap there that an SS20 won't fit. So that's when you use your smaller stone, which is either your SS16 or your SS12, whichever fits. And then if you wanted to go ahead and get a smaller stone, that's up to you, but I always like to end at SS12 so that way it's not that too tiny. I don't mind a little bit of gap here and there because since we painted our cup, you won't be able to see the gaps as visible. You know, it's sometimes not a lot of people can see the gap unless you went really, really, really up close. And if you're really, really looking for the gaps, you know, you won't be able to see it. Alright, so now that I finish halfway through between the logo and the top, what I normally do is I go ahead and go to the logo. I don't push it all the way down to the logo because again, you don't know how much space you will have. So what I would always do is I stop in the middle and then I make my perfect around the logo because as much as possible you would want an even round shape, you know, around the logo. You don't want it like, you know, crooked or not enough space. It's not going to look pretty. So here I use the SS16, or I think it's the SS12. Oh yeah, I use the SS12 and then I just put it around the logo and I go ahead and finish the entire middle part. So the purpose of doing this is so that way when you don't have enough space, you could still work with your small stones and the big stones here and there, and you won't have to worry about it reaching to the logo because like I said, if you have that problem where a specific stone doesn't fit, you would have uneven lines on the logo part, and as much as possible you would want it as perfect as possible, like the circle shape. You don't want it crooked, or you don't want it having different size stones around the logo. So plus it looks way prettier like this. So you just go ahead and do the entire logo part first, and then you fill in the in between. All right, so this is the part what I'm talking about where you would have a problem. That's why I fill in the logo part first. You see how this part is? You won't be able to fit an SS20, and since it's a round shape, so you're gonna end up having to work your way around it, making sure there's as little gap as possible. So in the middle, thank God that an SS20 fits, so that's good. So I just work my way again, left and right, left and right, left and right. So that way I know what stones fits on that part. So SS20 fits nice. Now in this part, an SS20 is gonna be a little bit big. So I have to choose and decide what works, an SS12 or an SS16. This is the part where I come across where I switch stones here and there. So you see, like it doesn't fit. So I have to remove that SS16. I have to go ahead and use another SS12. Again, it's just learn as you go, work with what you can work with, and don't be afraid of switching stones here and there. Just put that stone aside and then stick it back in when you need that stone. So that's what you do. Again, I use an SS12 and an SS12. So there we go. We have a bigger part again. So in here, you can't really fit two SS20. So again, I would have to work with a smaller stone. And here I'm putting an SS16 and I believe an SS12 would fit. Nope, still didn't work. See? So you just, again, take it out and then an SS12 and an SS12 again. So, I make mistake even though I'm quite experienced with this rhinestone, because you have to understand each project is very different. Even though you can go ahead and tell yourself that, oh, I already made this 10 times, it should be exactly the same as the other cup. No, sometimes that's not the case. I don't know why. But so yeah, I just work with what I can work with, and I work around the problems, use smaller stones if I have to, use bigger stones if I have to. So that's why I make sure that I covered the logo first, then work my way from up to down. And then I just, always go back in the middle again, because it's always better to have an even outer line, if that makes sense, than a crooked outer line when you're doing a rhinestone. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up. And the next step, you're just going to go ahead and fill out the entire logo part. Just go around it, use SS12, use the same stone that you used the very beginning to cover the outer part of the logo. As you can see, the glue starts off white, but it dries out clear, and it's gonna become more clear later on as it dries. So there you go. Just go around your logo carefully and make that circle outline, and then you can go ahead and work on your entire cup, and it's going to be easier and much cleaner look when you do this. Alright, so now that we're done, and as you can see, we're now halfway down the cup. And what I do is I'm gonna go ahead and now start the bottom. Now you're probably wondering, why is this woman going up and down, left and right, and all of that? Because like I said, I prefer my outer cup or the outer line to be even and as precise as possible. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and do my bottom part, so that way it all has even stones. Because what happened if you just, I mean, you can go ahead and do what works for you, you know. I see some people work from up to down, down to up. That's totally up to you. But I don't like coming to the end of the cup and having to use different types of stones. And so you can really see the stones in the bottom that has different sizes, and I don't want that. As much as possible, I want it to be the same stones as possible. And the middle part, I'll just go ahead and mix up my size of stones later on. I prefer it that way. So as you can see for the bottom part, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what I meant when people use cardstock or anything to make sure that the bottom part is even. So this is what they do. They put a cardstock, push the stone down, and just to make sure nothing is poking. So that's what you can do for yourself. It's easier if you're just a beginner and this is the first time you're doing this. This helps a lot. So you can go ahead and try this trick. So I'm gonna go ahead and just speed this up and fill up the entire cup. The same method you would put like how you started in the very beginning. You can see it's a habit. I still push it up a little bit because I'm more used to just using my hand and just eyeballing it just to make sure that it's even, rather than use the cardstock, because I felt like the cardstock doesn't work for me. It did work for me in the beginning, but now I prefer to just eyeball it. So let me go ahead and just speed this up and I'll show you what's next. Alright, so this is what it looks like. So like I told you, you would have a little bit of white glue still because it's still wet. But once it's finished, it's going to dry clear. So now let's move on to the cup. So you also have to be careful that you need your rhinestone to cure for about 3 days before you wash it. Make sure that you cure it, don't touch it, don't wash it, don't get it wet for 3 days, and then you wash it off. Don't go finishing the cup and then sending it to your customers if you're doing it as a small business. Just make sure that you wash it and nothing comes off, because the last thing you want happening is you send it to your customers and they wash it and the stones fall off. So basically it's kind of just like a quality test, right? You don't want to give really bad product out there, especially if it's your small business. Sorry about this part. I keep going out of frame. I didn't realize it was too zoomed in, but for the cup, for the cover, you would just use a smaller size SS12 and you just do the honeycomb method again. I see a lot of people using the SS20 and just go around it. Again, you can do that. It doesn't really work for me. So you see how I'm just like taking out everything? So I use SS16 first, but I've decided it's too big, so I went and go for a smaller part. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot longer than just putting an SS20 and just go around it, right? But I like my cup to look good. I mean, I'm not saying the SS20 doesn't look good. If that's what you want, you can do that. But for me, I just prefer to use smaller stone. So that way, I don't know, it looks very even by looking at it. So that's what I do. I use the smaller stone, and you just go ahead and finish the entire cup again. The honey method is what I would always use, but you would come across a part where you've started doing the scatter method quite a bit, just because the gaps aren't the same anymore. You know, the space that you're working with aren't the same anymore. You have to use all the sizes stones that you have in different places just to fill in the gaps. So just work with what you have and, you know, just enjoy the process. So I'm just gonna go ahead and speed this up and I'll show you what the final look is. So this is the final look of what your tumbler would look like. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up and do not forget to hit that subscribe button down below. And again, thank you guys for watching and supporting this channel. I'll see you guys on my next video. Bye!